Year 70 AD. You are a Roman commander serving under Titus. Before you lies Jerusalem, a holy city fortified with towering walls, strong defenses, and men determined to fight to the death. 3 layers of walls, each stronger than the last, towers rising over 130 feet, deep valleys protecting every approach, and within the city more than 20,000 rebels waiting. The question is, how would you take it? Welcome to Great History, your daily 30 minutes of history, a place to return each day, because there's always another story, another battle, another turning point you shouldn't miss. We're on the march to 50,000 subscribers, and with your support, we'll get there. So hit that button and join us. In today's episode, we uncover the weapon Rome considered its deadliest machine, how it functioned, how it tore through Jerusalem's defenses, and how it shaped one of the bloodiest sieges of the ancient world. Let's set the stage. The conflict we call the First Jewish-Roman War, or simply the Great Revolt, began in 66 AD and raged for years. It grew out of long-standing resentment, heavy taxation, cultural tensions, and Roman misrule. The spark came under the governor Josephus Florus. Known for corruption, Florus plundered the temple treasury in Jerusalem, pushing the city into open revolt. In one infamous act, he seized 17 talents of sacred silver under the pretense of collecting unpaid taxes. Outrage followed. People mocked him publicly, even passing around a basket as if collecting charity for a poor man. Florus struck back with Roman brutality. His soldiers arrested Jewish leaders, scourged them, and crucified men of rank outside the city walls. This cruelty drove Jerusalem into full rebellion. The uprising spread quickly. Cities across Judea rose in defiance. In Caesarea, long-standing tensions between Jews and Greeks erupted into violence. Greeks sided with the Romans while Jews struck back. Roman citizens and collaborators became prime targets. For a while, the rebels seemed unstoppable. The province was slipping out of Rome's grip. Rome could not allow that. In 67 AD, Emperor Nero dispatched one of his most trusted generals, Vespasian, to crush the revolt. Vespasian did not come lightly armed. He marched with the 5th, 10th, and 15th legions, later reinforced by his son Titus. Altogether, Rome deployed tens of thousands of troops, auxiliaries, and allies, a massive hammer to smash Judea. Vespasian followed Rome's proven strategy. Don't strike the heart first, weaken the body. He advanced through Galilee and Samaria step by step, breaking resistance as he went. At Jotapata, rebels fought fiercely but fell after a brutal siege. Tarichaea soon followed, then Gamla in the Golan Heights. Each conquest weakened Jewish resistance in the north and drove survivors toward Jerusalem. By the time Nero's death in 68 AD plunged Rome into civil war, Judea was already devastated. When Vespasian became emperor in 69 AD, he left the final assault to his son Titus. By then, Jerusalem had become the last stronghold of the revolt. Refugees from across the countryside had crowded within its walls, swelling the population into the hundreds of thousands. But instead of unity, the city was torn apart by infighting. Rival factions, John of Gischala, Simon Bar Giora, and the Zealots, clashed bitterly, even burning each other's food supplies in desperation. For Rome, Jerusalem was more than a military target. It was the spiritual and cultural center of Judea. The Second Temple, rebuilt after the Babylonian exile and magnificently expanded under Herod the Great, stood at the heart of the city. For Jews across the ancient world, the temple was not just a house of worship but the living symbol of God's covenant with his people. To hold it meant control over Jewish identity itself. Josephus, the Jewish historian who defected to Rome, stressed that Jerusalem was the nerve center of the revolt. Political leaders, priestly authority, and revolutionary command were all concentrated there. To the rebels, the city symbolized hope and divine protection. To Rome, its capture would mean not only the end of resistance, but also a clear declaration of imperial supremacy. Strategically, once Jerusalem fell, the rest of Judea was bound to collapse. Symbolically, the destruction of the temple would deliver a decisive message. No local god, no sacred shrine, and no national tradition could withstand the power of Rome. Let's examine Jerusalem's defenses as they stood in the spring of 70 AD. Just before the Roman assault began, the city lay on 2 opposing hills. On one side, the upper city, often called the citadel, and on the other, the lower city, known as Acra. Between them stretched a valley so steep and difficult to cross that it acted like a natural moat. Josephus notes that the first impression was not only the vastness of the city, but also its walls. Jerusalem was not surrounded by a single barrier, but by 3 concentric fortifications, each stronger than the one before. For the Romans, masters of engineering and siege warfare, this challenge was unlike most others. They faced not only stone and mortar, but centuries of construction designed to make the city unassailable. The outermost line was the third wall, started by King Herod Agrippa between 41 and 44 AD to secure the northern suburb of Ballista. Though unfinished at his death, it was completed by the rebels at the start of the revolt. This wall enclosed the northern quarter and extended protection to new districts outside the older defenses. Its towers rose over 130 feet, with Josephus highlighting the Tower of Stephanus, which offered views as far as the Dead Sea. To a Roman general gazing from the plain, this wall appeared less a fortification and more a mountain of stone. Behind it stood the second wall, cutting across the city's northern section. This wall was more compact, enclosing the upper city, where the wealthy and influential had lived before the uprising. For the defenders, it was an ideal fallback. If the third wall collapsed, they could withdraw here and fight from an even stronger position. For the Romans, it meant repeating their siege efforts from the start, driving rams and siege towers uphill while under relentless missile fire. The innermost defenses were the oldest, dating back to the Hasmonean era. This wall ran along the city's western and southern edges, enclosing the lower city and guarding its most exposed approaches. Despite its age, it remained a powerful structure, reinforced by the natural protection of steep hills and ravines. Josephus records its towers as nearly 60 feet high, giving defenders commanding views of the valleys below. From those towers, Jewish rebels could rain arrows, stones, and burning pitch upon advancing Romans. And then came the centerpiece, the Temple Mount. Surrounded by immense retaining walls and colonnades, it was effectively a fortress within a fortress. Even if the Romans breached the outer rings, they still faced defenders entrenched on the elevated temple courts. For the rebels, this was not merely about physical defenses, but about sacred ground, the very heart of their faith. To the defenders, the temple was the very house of God, and surrendering it was unimaginable. This layered defense system gave them a major advantage. From towering walls and steep valleys, they had perfect positions to fire. They knew every corner of the city, every hidden passage, and every choke point. The Romans brought siege engines and discipline, but each step forward meant entering a battlefield shaped by nature and centuries of construction. In 70 AD, with his father now emperor, Titus led roughly 48,000 troops south. Years of conquest and bloodshed had led to this decisive moment. The Romans stood at Jerusalem's gates, prepared to end the revolt once and for all. On the 14th of Nisan, around mid-April, Titus began full-scale siege operations. By this time, Roman siege warfare was a refined science. They rarely launched reckless assaults. Instead, they relied on patience, engineering, and discipline. The first step was encirclement, cutting the city off from all aid. Roman legions built ditches, walls, and palisades stretching for miles, ensuring no one escaped and no supplies entered. Their aim was starvation. Titus even allowed pilgrims into the city but blocked their exit, swelling the population and straining food stores. Josephus, an eyewitness, wrote that Titus ordered a wall nearly 5 miles long built around Jerusalem, completed in only 3 days. Once the city was trapped, the Romans moved closer with earthworks. Their engineers, unmatched in skill, piled up dirt and stone to build massive ramps rising to the level of Jerusalem's defenses. These ramps were exhausting to construct but vital, as they allowed siege towers and rams to be positioned against the walls. Siege towers, clad in wood and hides, carried archers and artillery crews who fired from above, keeping defenders pinned while rams attacked the gates and stonework. These rams, suspended on chains within protective shelters called tortoises, pounded the walls repeatedly until they cracked. Towers also served as artillery bases and platforms for storming the defenses. Yet the defenders were determined. Josephus describes Jerusalem's garrison as fierce and inventive. They burned siege engines, undermined ramps, and launched sudden attacks against the legions. Every Roman gain was costly. To throw legion after legion directly at those walls would have been suicidal. Titus knew that brute force alone would not take the city. He needed to balance speed with caution and strategy. This is where Roman artillery, the torsion-powered ballista, became decisive. Unlike battering rams or towers that required close contact and risked fire, the ballista provided long-range destruction. The Romans placed them on raised platforms around the city, giving them clear views of the walls. From these heights they could strike defenders almost anywhere. Stones shattered battlements and parapets, while iron-tipped bolts pierced shields and armor, killing men before they could strike back. Titus advanced with careful planning, knowing this was the final confrontation of the revolt. Tacitus claims that over 600,000 people were trapped inside, men and women alike taking up arms, choosing death over expulsion. Josephus gives an even larger figure, close to 1 million, though most historians see these numbers as exaggerations. Still, the truth remains Jerusalem was overflowing. Pilgrims who had come for Passover were suddenly trapped, while refugees from Judea, Galilee, and Idumea swelled the numbers even more. Food was scarce before the siege began, and conditions quickly worsened. Inside, chaos ruled. The city was not defended by one united force, but by rival factions. John of Gischala and Simon Bar Giora fought for control, even destroying each other's food supplies in a civil war within the walls. Josephus records that around 23,400 armed men stood ready to fight, but their strength was weakened by rival leaders. Only when the Romans began battering the walls did John and Simon set aside their direct conflict, though each still held separate areas of control. John commanded the Temple Mount, the Ophel, and the Kidron Valley, while Simon's men controlled the city's residential quarters. Jerusalem appeared united, but in reality it remained divided. Titus, meanwhile, did not rush into battle. Before committing to a full siege, he personally surveyed the northern approaches with 600 cavalry. The 12th Fulminata, 15th Apollinaris, and 5th Macedonica legions positioned themselves on Mount Scopus to the northeast, while the renowned 10th Legion took its post on the Mount of Olives. These placements were carefully chosen. From these high points, the Romans could dominate the open ground and begin surrounding the city. Titus then focused on Jerusalem's north side. The city was otherwise shielded by steep valleys, natural barriers that made a direct attack nearly impossible. The northern wall, however, lacked these obstacles, making it the only feasible point for siege engines, towers, and artillery. With this in mind, Titus concentrated his forces there, preparing a calculated assault. On the 14th of Nisan, as the week-long Passover festival began, Jewish fighters temporarily halted their attacks. The Romans seized this moment to move their siege works closer to the walls. But inside the city, conflict persisted. On the first night of Passover, John's men slipped through the temple gates, left open for worshippers, and stormed into the inner courtyards. They defeated the zealots, forcing many to join their ranks. Some zealots fled underground beneath the Temple Mount, while others submitted to John. Eleazar himself stayed, but now under John's authority. Meanwhile, Titus tightened his strategy. His forces methodically encircled Jerusalem, cutting it off from supplies and reinforcements. The Roman ballista played several crucial roles. Day after day, their crews unleashed constant fire. Whenever defenders tried to appear on the walls, volleys of iron-tipped bolts forced them to retreat or take cover, shifting the balance of the fight. Heavy stones launched from the ballista demolished towers, broke parapets, and scattered groups of fighters in fear. Equally important was suppressive fire. As Roman engineers advanced siege towers and battering rams, the ballista barrage pinned down defenders, making it safer to move these vulnerable machines forward. The Jewish historian Josephus, an eyewitness to the siege, left vivid descriptions of this devastation. He wrote of stones so massive they could crush men instantly, and bolts hurled with such force that they sometimes pierced through 2 or 3 men before stopping. Watchmen were even stationed to warn of incoming projectiles, which could be seen from afar due to their size and the way they spun through the air. The effect was terrifying, reminding all inside the city that even behind their walls, death could strike from above at any moment. Despite everything, the Jews did not surrender. Internal clashes reignited, with John determined to hold the temple complex and Simon fighting on multiple fronts, even disrupting Roman siege works. Eventually, the two factions agreed to a truce, but by then the Romans had finished their own preparations. The Jewish forces launched a daring counterattack, initially pushing the Romans back. However, Roman cavalry quickly reversed the momentum. In the fighting, the Idumean leader John ben Sossus was killed, and Josephus records the first crucifixions of the siege. After 15 days of failed attempts to set Roman siege engines ablaze, the Romans finally broke through. By late April, after relentless hammering with rams and ballista fire, the third wall collapsed. By May 70 AD, following their successful breach, Roman forces shifted to the second wall, the next line of defense blocking access to Jerusalem's core. This wall protected the expanding northern districts and guarded the path into the city's heart. As soon as Roman battering rams struck the middle section, their ballista opened fire. From fortified positions behind the siege lines, crews hurled massive stones and iron-tipped bolts with deadly precision. These projectiles did more than damage stone. They spread terror. They pierced shields, hurled defenders backward, and destroyed any sense of safety on the walls. The constant barrage forced defenders to divide their strength between repairing breaches, extinguishing fires, and manning the ramparts, all under relentless fire. Still, the battle was grinding. Within 5 days, the Romans broke through a section of the second wall, only to be trapped in Jerusalem's narrow streets, where locals ambushed them and inflicted heavy losses. Forced to withdraw, the Romans regrouped and returned 4 days later with greater force, widening the breach and finally capturing the area. They then leveled the northern district and paused for several days to rest. During this time, more Jews deserted, leaving Jerusalem weaker than before. When the Romans advanced on the first wall, the conflict turned into a brutal phase of mechanical warfare. This wall was not easily broken. It had stood for generations, reinforced and repaired over time, a trusted line of defense for the people. Positioned on high ground around the city, Roman ballista pounded the first wall day after day. Crews of 8 to 10 men worked in shifts, tightening ropes, adjusting targets, and launching volley after volley. Some machines were aimed for precision, their iron bolts designed to clear defenders from the battlements. Others fired heavy stone shots, each impact crashing into the wall with bone-shaking force. The psychological toll was as devastating as the physical destruction. Standing on the wall meant risking death at any moment. One mistake or delay could prove fatal. Meanwhile, Roman infantry and engineers advanced under cover of the barrage. The ballista fire forced defenders to duck, scatter, and exhaust themselves repairing damage or extinguishing fires. Behind this storm of missiles, battering rams rolled forward and siege towers edged closer. The Romans used the ballista both as shield and sword, suppressing resistance so their other machines could operate effectively. Josephus, the Jewish historian who witnessed these events, described the terror inside the city. Every crash of stone, every sudden whistle of a bolt, deepened panic among the defenders. Logistics further amplified Rome's advantage. Their supply lines ensured a steady flow of ammunition, stones, bolts, and timber, while Jerusalem's defenders, cut off from the countryside, weakened daily. Hunger wore them down even as they struggled to repair the walls. Hour after hour, the Roman ballista continued their assault, tilting the balance further toward the besiegers. After weeks of relentless pounding, cracks spread across the masonry of the first wall, signaling its imminent collapse. Stones broke loose and crashed down. In Rome's final advance, it was the ballista that turned the tide. Relentless strikes weakened the walls enough for rams and ladders to complete the breach. The gap opened, and Roman soldiers marched through in ordered ranks. By July, the fight for Jerusalem ignited again. Titus commanded new siege ramps to rise against the Antonia fortress and the towers of the upper city. Inside the walls, life became unbearable. Food had vanished, prices soared beyond reach, and hunger ruled all. Corpses littered the streets. Families searched sewers for scraps. Josephus wrote of children with swollen stomachs and deserters bloated with disease. Later accounts describe starvation so severe that people's hair fell out. Some perished from sickness, others faded away, and a few resorted to unthinkable acts. The Romans pressed forward. After completing 4 immense ramps, they captured the Antonia fortress and turned to the temple itself. John of Gischala tried desperate measures, tunneling under Roman machines and setting them ablaze. Yet Roman engineers rebuilt quickly, then sealed the city with a 5-meter stone wall, finished in only 3 days. Jerusalem was now fully trapped. No escape, no supplies. Inside, chaos deepened. Simon Bar Giora executed nobles and anyone calling for surrender, tossing their bodies outside the walls. John's men looted the temple, melted sacred vessels, and consumed holy wine and oil as common rations. The famine reached its height. Josephus recounts the horror of Maria of Perea, who, robbed of her food, roasted her own child. When rebels entered, drawn by the smell of meat, she offered them the remains. They fled in terror. From the Antonia fortress, the Romans launched their strike on the temple. After a brutal 12-hour struggle, they were repelled, but the defenders were weakening. On the 17th of Tammuz, the daily sacrifices ceased. No priests remained, no lambs to offer. Titus even sent Josephus with peace terms and sacrificial animals. But John mocked him, declaring the city belonged to God and could never fall. The battle turned into fire. Romans burned the temple gates, courts, and halls, forcing defenders back. Titus convened a council to debate whether to preserve the temple as a symbol of Rome's triumph. But events moved beyond command. On August 8th, Roman troops stormed the outer courts. 2 days later, on August 10th, a soldier hurled a burning stick into a chamber and flames spread out of control. As the temple blazed, defenders fought with greater fury. Priests continued rituals until slain. Some threw themselves into the fire. Cassius Dio wrote that the Jews fought as if death there was an honor. Thousands fell on Roman blades or into the flames. Nearly 6,000, many women and children, crowded into a colonnade, only for the Romans to torch it, burning them alive. Soldiers looted treasures, planted their standards in the temple, and sacrificed to Rome's gods. The wealth of gold and silver was so vast it halved the price of gold in Syria. With the temple gone, Titus offered the rebels one last chance. They demanded safe passage with their families, but he refused. The next day, the lower city went up in flames, archives, palaces, homes, all consumed. Rebels retreated to Herod's palace in the upper city, seizing whatever remained. Yet the stronghold lasted only briefly. Roman siege ramps went up, and within 18 days the walls collapsed. On the 7th of Elul, resistance ended. Romans surged through the streets, killing all they found. Families starved to death in their homes. Others were cut down where they stood. By nightfall, the slaughter slowed, but by morning, Jerusalem burned end to end. By early September, it was over. The city lay in ruins. Titus ordered it leveled, every street, every wall, every house, except for 3 massive towers of Herod's palace and a fragment of the western wall. These ruins remained as a grim reminder that even the strongest defenses had yielded to Rome. Josephus, who witnessed it, wrote that the devastation was so complete former residents could not recognize their own city, and strangers would doubt it had ever been inhabited. Archaeology confirms his words. Fallen stones from the Temple Mount, collapsed houses, thick ash, even melted glass from the fires. These remain the scars of Jerusalem's end, brought down by Rome's siege engines, fire, and unstoppable might.